Tonight on 60 Minutes. A civil rights crusader partially responsible for the America we know today, the other the face of America as we know today. Both have created legacies for themselves in the name of civil rights, Abe Lincoln and his Emancipation Proclamation, and works in the 13th Amendment, and President Kennedy with his many executive orders and talks of his Civil Rights Act. As we diverge into the past, we have the pleasure of talking with both of these individuals who do share a similar history. But a question arises with these legacies. Who has a greater influence on the current America? It's 1863, in the third year of a bloody civil war. The president is faced with an important decision, and that is to enact an Emancipation Proclamation or to cower in fear and wait for this bloody war to come to an end. President Lincoln decides to go with the Emancipation Proclamation. This frees all slaves within the United States territory, roughly 3.1 million. This makes the Civil War commonly referred to as a war fought for the slaves. But in Lincoln's mind, it was only to preserve a dissipating Union. And with that, I'd like to welcome my guest, Mr. Abe Lincoln.
Thank you.
Now, a man who needs no introduction is one of the most significant faces of the Civil Rights Movement, with his Executive Order 10914, giving food to the needy, his interest in food stamp progression, his establishment of the Peace Corps, his calming demeanor throughout a crisis many feared was the end of days, and his open support for a civil rights bill to be enacted. A man who normally needs no introduction, our current Commander-in-Chief, Mr. John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Thank you both for being here tonight. We're very glad to have you, but let's get right to it. Mr. Lincoln, the first one's for you. Now everyone sees you as a man who strives for equal opportunity, sees you nothing but equality, and he even freed the slaves. Now what is your response to this?
I shall answer this in similar ways as I have in the past. While I protest against that counterfeit logic, which concludes that because I don't want a black woman for a slave, I must want her as my wife, I need not have her for either. I can simply leave her alone. In some respects, she certainly is my equal, but in others she is not. While her natural right to eat bread, she earns with her own hands without asking leave of anyone else, she is my equal, and the equal of all others.
Just to clear any possible miscommunication, you're saying a black woman is not necessarily your equal, but she does not deserve treatment separate from those of other humans.
I need not worry about the color of their skin when treating them with similar regard.
I see. Now, Mr. President, next question is for you. We hear from numerous sources that you are creating a civil rights bill. Please tell us how this will compare to Mr. Lincoln's legacy.
Well, I believe in a United States where no one should ask what their country can do for them, but what they can do for their country. Therefore, a country where people decide to believe in the rights for every human is one I love leading. That is where my support for these movements are born from.
I see. Well, you sure sound like a crowd pleaser, Mr. President.
I only look to preserve the union between the people and I.
You know, Mr. Kennedy, I believe that has been said one time before.
Yeah, but without a war, Abraham.
I cannot believe.
Next question for you, Mr. Lincoln. Many historians suggest the Emancipation Proclamation put into order January 1st, 1863, and now declared in your own words, as all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are, and henceforward shall be, free. Now, in reality, it had not done much to actually create a positive effect. Now, what do you say about this?
Now, upon enacting this bill, Hamlin advised me of the great effect this proclamation would have on both my legacy and of the nation's legacy. I understand that many were unaffected due to the lack of enforcement because of the war, but the concept alone was so extravagant, so different, not to brag or anything, but it was pioneer-like. Nobody had made a movement like this before.
Before you continue, Mr. Kennedy looks as if he has a question of his own.
Abraham, are you familiar with the concept of sharecropping?
I don't believe I've heard of it.
As I expected, your freed slaves were pulled right back into a system of degrading work through sharecropping, which gave them little profit and forced them to also deal with black codes that were in some cases just as bad as slavery itself.
I was unaware of the magnitude of research you've done on myself, Mr. President. Am I your role model?
Mr. Lincoln, you had a great legacy indeed, and I respect your work, even if it had virtually no effect on your short life.
Speaking of Mr. Lincoln, we all know how the story goes. You were shot and killed in a theater. Please explain to the audience how you were here today.
Well, I've heard this story more than once, Bill, and what really happened was... You see, the young man forgot to clean his pistol, and it jammed when he tried to fire.
Ah, so just like that, you're here today. That doesn't explain your youthful appearance.
I wouldn't call it youthful, Bill.
I look youthful today because of advancing technologies not yet released to the public.
Ah, understood. And where is this technology from?
I shouldn't be telling you this, but I got it from an older fellow by the last name Khrushchev.
Anyhow, next question for you, Mr. President. Now, given the time in which Mr. Lincoln was president, it was relatively challenging to the United States. Now, perhaps it was hard for him, thus granting him a greater importance in the world. Now, would you argue with this statement, Mr. Kennedy?
I would love to. See, when Mr. Lincoln was president, times were indeed tough. To talk of the United States, not being exactly that, is a scary thought. Now take that thought and develop it into the idea of the United States not existing physically. Those are the standards I face. With the development of new technology and warfare materials, such as the nuclear bomb, it is ever so crucial for myself to make the right call 100% of the time. One example, during this past year's 14-day event with the dealing of the Cuban missiles. Therefore, I would mark that statement as incorrect to whoever says so.
Well, Mr. President, I don't think anyone disagrees with that statement.
Well,
Well, folks, unfortunately, Mr. Kennedy has places to be. Dallas, is it?
Indeed it is, Bill. I'm afraid I have to meet the great people of Texas.
Well, the President of the United States, everyone. Oh, and last to leave, Mr. Abraham Lincoln.
Kennedy and the Kennedy. Kennedy. Smile, you son of a...